Hello, everyone, and welcome to the FCC Young Farmer Summit. I am truly delighted to be in this virtual room with hundreds of amazing folks all across Canada in agriculture, food and beverage, and all of the businesses that help feed our country and the world. My name is Sage Walker. I am a two-time Olympian for Team Canada, and I have had the honor of representing Canada 13 times on the world stage in the sport of track and field. But most importantly, I myself am a young farmer and rancher. I grew up in southern Alberta on my family's cattle ranch, and recently, this past year, my husband and I took the venture of purchasing our own ranch. I have had the amazing opportunity to listen to some of our speakers today, and they are truly a wealth of knowledge. So I hope you gain as much knowledge as I have from them, and I hope you are ready to ask the important questions. So I really am excited about this summit, but I also want to wish everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day who's out there watching all across Canada today. While today's session is being delivered virtually, wherever we find ourselves in Canada, we are on traditional Indigenous territories with rich traditions, stories, and histories that we have the opportunity to honor. We pay respect to the Indigenous people of the past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their culture, heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. Before we dive into our agenda today, I want to just do a few little housekeeping. As you may have noticed, there is a chat bar on that right side of your screen. We would love it if you could let us know where you're joining us from today in Canada. Maybe also share with us what part of agriculture you're in, whether you're a beef producer, a grain producer, so everyone could get to know each other a little bit who's in this chat room today. So please share with us where you're coming from and what part of agriculture you're in or what part of agriculture you aspire to be in. I wanted to let you know there is also a Q&A button. It is that little question mark there. And we really encourage you to please ask questions during our speakers today. We will have a time during the speakers' presentations to answer those questions. They love to answer questions, and I know a lot of producers in the room here today might have similar questions. So please feel free to ask away today. We want you to get as much value and as much information from this summit as possible. Right beside that Q&A tab is also a polling tab. So today we're also going to start with a fun, quick little poll. And it is, which of these is the most annoying farm chore? So we'll give you a little second to answer. I definitely know which mine is, and I will share that with you guys in a little bit once we get all those polls in. I wanted to let you know too, if you are having any technical issues with anything going on this virtual platform, there is a blue support button that you will see on the bottom of the screen. We have an amazing AV team, and they are working behind the scenes today, and they will be able to assist you with any problems you have. So please let them know if you are having problems. All right. With all of that said, we are going to get started with our first phenomenal speaker of the day. Cynthia Beck is provisionally registered psychologist who provides mental health services and psychological assessments to rural Saskatchewan. She is an active advocate for mental health in agriculture, developing and facilitating agriculture-specific mental health programming and providing tailored presentations. She co-founded the board and is on the board for the Sask Ag Matters Mental Health Network. And she is also on the board of directors for Canadian Western Agribition. Her family operates Beck Farms, a multi-generational mixed cattle operation and grain operation near Milestone, Saskatchewan. So could you please welcome Cynthia Beck?
Hi, Sage. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I know you guys must be very busy on your ranch these days.
Oh, we are in the thick of calving. We just got through the bull sale on the farm. So yeah, it's always a really exciting time of year for us right now.
Yes, super exciting. We're thrilled to have you here today. So take it away.
Thank you. So, as we get started today, I really encourage people, if you have a question, to type that question in the chat box at the time that it comes to you. So, we know based on research that when you have a question and you're taking in information, your brain will do one of two things. It will either prioritize the question and think, okay, this question is really important. And so what it does is it holds the question in mind and then filters off all of the other information. So you won't actually take any, points or tips or learning from this presentation. The other thing that your mind might do is say, hey, this information is important. So we're going to forget about the question and, just focus on what's happening right now. So that is why I strongly encourage you, if you have a question, just type it in the chat box, and Sage is going to monitor that, and she will interject with your questions, and I will answer them kind of as we go. So I know it's difficult to think of this as a conversation when it's a virtual platform, but hey, we can try. We've done this before during the COVID times, so maybe we can do this again. So I think that a lot of people in the agriculture industry don't really recognize the amount of knowledge and wisdom that we need to have in order to be a producer. And I'm not sure what everybody on here produces, right? We might have livestock of some kind. You may have an apiary or a fish farm or, aquaculture or perhaps an orchard, that type of thing. But I'd like you to take a moment to recognize the amount of knowledge that you require on a daily basis in order to do your job, meet the needs on your farm. You might be, if you have livestock, you might have to be a nutritionist. You might have to be a veterinarian. You might have to be the laborer that does all of the work. You also might have to be the family therapist who tries to keep everybody cohesive and working together and keeping all of the relationships going. So I'd like you to take a moment to recognize the knowledge that you have, but also the knowledge and wisdom and experience that the other generations or the other people that are on your farm, that they also have, because that is a really important aspect of transition. So what's your most important asset? Well, you are the greatest asset to your operation, and so are the people who work with you. As much as technology has advanced, our cows can't really feed and bed themselves in the winter very easily. And at this point, our crops cannot plant themselves. So we still need people. One thing I'd like to highlight is a lot of people, when you talk about mental health, I think they automatically think of mental illness. And a lot of people really shy away from that. Like, nope, I don't deal with that. I don't have any problems. Well, if you have a heartbeat, you experience mental health. Just like if you have a heartbeat, you are experiencing physical health. So in total, that kind of combines to well-being and cognitive health. And if you look at the screen there, what our cognitive health includes really is every aspect of us. It is all of the parts of us and how we operate in our daily lives. So with that though, depending on where you are on the spectrum or the continuum of like, oh, hey, I'm here and I have excellent physical health and could run a marathon, and I have excellent cognitive health, I feel great every day. Or you might be down here, maybe you're experiencing problems with your physical health, maybe you're having problems with symptoms of depression or anxiety, have a tough time getting out of bed to do the chores in the morning. It swings and it moves, kind of along this continuum or a sliding scale. So typically in the agriculture world, I know lots of people, even family members, who we've experienced physical difficulties, illness, and we still have to feed the cows, right? But when it comes to our cognitive health, a lot of times we don't realize we're experiencing those problems. Like, how do you know if you're stressed? our go-to as human beings is when someone inquires, and says, "How are you doing?" We're like, "Yeah, I'm good. How are you?" Or, "Oh, hey, it's fine." So quite often we shrug it off. We don't even really think about it. We don't share it with other people. And maybe it's not something that you think about all the time. So it's not like your brain holds a sign up saying, like, "Hey, hey, help, I need help." But there usually will be signs. I'd like you to think for a moment about people in your community. Like, have you ever come across someone in your community who is like that grouchy old curmudgeon? Like, you see them in the store, you see them at the gas station, you're like, "Ugh, I just cannot handle their negativity today." I'd like you to kind of think about it, because, and that's why I've got the donkey there and use the other word for the donkey. And you might be the person who is called referring to the town jackass. Sorry for my language. But if you think about it, maybe that person has been so unwell for such a long time that it's actually changed their way of being, how they present, how they think, how they behave. So I just want you to kind of think of that. Does someone come to mind in your community who is the town donkey, I'll say? So there's always warning signs when we are experiencing problems with our cognitive health. Typically, people outside of us see it before we do. So these are observable signs. You can see them with your own eyes. And you might know someone who you've seen had changes to their routine, like maybe their sleep has changed. Or if they were a person who, went to town and they were always clean when they went to town, and then you don't see them for a while, and then they come to town and suddenly they're like really disheveled, or they're not showered and they're wearing really dirty clothes and they don't seem like themselves. That might actually be a warning sign that they're experiencing challenges to their cognitive health. Other things are the emotions are off, trouble communicating. They isolate. Maybe you don't see them anymore, or they avoid your contact. Sometimes they engage in risky behavior. Now, typically with adults, that includes risky driving, risky operation of machinery, like say you got out to fix your baler and you didn't turn the PTO off, right? Or you might be engaging in substance use. Sometimes people will also engage in really uncharacteristic judgment or decision making. So you might have a neighbor who, during a drought, decides to go and buy, a $3 million or $2 million combine. And you think to yourself, like, why? How on earth? Like, why would they do that? Well, they might have panicked, and that's a sign that they are struggling. The other one that is really identifiable in the agriculture world is noting when there is farm deterioration over time, or land deterioration, or poor animal health. So typically, a lot of veterinarians are kind of one of the first professions, maybe off of the farm, to identify, hey, there's a problem there with that person. But how do you help yourself? Quite often, like, this is something I always say to people: I can't drink a glass of water and you benefit from it. Like, it doesn't matter who is around us and who is trying to help us. At some point, we have to choose to help ourselves. At some point, I'm hoping that folks take a moment to recognize or reflect and think about how they are doing, and think of ways to maybe start helping yourself. And that's kind of a growth mindset where you are learning to make positive changes. So what helps us and what hinders us? So that is not my tractor. I just need to clarify that. It was a friend of mine's. Quite often the same things, everything in moderation. Some things that help us can also hinder us if we're doing it different ways. And here's an example. If you had a piece of machinery and you noticed that the bolts or lug nuts were loose on a tire, and you needed to get going and you had to go do chores, would you say to yourself, "Oh, I'll deal with that later"? And then you did it again the next day and the next day, and pretty soon that tire falls off. how productive is that? Like, number one, can your tractor do its job? How easy is it for you to operate your tractor on 3 tires? Not very. It's also not safe. Quite often, I don't think that we would do that on the farm. Number one, it's costly. Number two, it really stops productivity. But we do that with ourselves all the time. We might recognize something's going on for us, but we put it off. Like, oh, I've got a toothache. I'll just take some, rub some Ambisol and keep on going. Or my vision isn't working very well. Well, you put off the appointment for a long, long time to get your eyes checked.
And I just wanted to ask you a quick question that came up, Cynthia. Someone said in your list of warning signs, you have listed, for example, sleep routine and low energy. And they were wondering how many days in a row of low energy or how many nights of poor sleep do you think are concerning or a symptom of something bigger?
So it depends on your time of year, right? In the agriculture world, our seasons are cyclical. So during calving season, if you're tired during calving season, that makes sense, right? That is part of the routine. However, if you are outside of a high production season and you are still having a very difficult time sleeping, or you are sleeping so much and having a really hard time dragging your butt out of bed, then I would go chat. Number one, go chat with your doctor to rule out any biological or medical symptoms. And then also at the same time, reach out for other supports. We know that chronic sleep deprivation, which classifies as 6 hours of sleep or less for a 2-week period, we know that, and research has identified that we experience increased rates of illness. So a recent study came out with correlations or a relationship between chronic sleep deprivation and increased rates of Alzheimer's and increased rates of cancer. So that is something it's not something to be really worried about, but be proactive. And just like you would fix your tire, right? Go get that checked out. And that's a really great question. The sleep piece also could be attributable to some other things, right? Like, if you think about it, I'd like you to think about your body like a piece of equipment, or whether you have equipment or not. Let's say it's like a truck or a car, okay? So in the morning, if you were to get up and hop in your car and say, okay, today I have a trip and I'm going to drive across the country, and you just take off driving, you didn't fill up with gas. Well, eventually you're going to end up on the side of the road, like stranded, right? Your gas runs out, your car stops, and you are not productive. You don't get anywhere. Well, I'd like you to think of the food that we put in our body every day. That is like the gas that you put in your car, okay? So when we fuel our body with nutrition, it gives us the energy to operate. Whereas water in our body is like oil in your engine, okay? So we need water to hydrate our brains. It helps our blood flow, increases blood flow to our organs. And it also helps us between the nutrition and the water. It has huge impacts on our ability to think during the day, like good decision making. It impacts our ability to regulate our emotions, how we communicate with other people, and it even impacts our productivity. Same thing with sleep. When I am working with folks who have really difficult time getting to sleep, or they experience too much sleep, which also is not that helpful. What ends up happening is that they lose productivity over time. So you might think to yourself, goodness, I'm exhausted, but I have no time for rest. Well, you actually will accomplish less in your day than you would if you went and laid down for a 20-minute nap and made sure you ate something and drank some water. So those are your 3 kind of priorities every day, if you can. Drink a glass of water the first thing you do. That's the first thing you do when you wake up. Drink a glass of water. Then you can have your coffee if you want. And fuel your body with nutrition, like food that your body will actually use, okay? Having the sleep is really important. During certain times of year, we cannot get a full night's sleep. Well, then have a nap. That also works, right? Quality over quantity. I want you to think of it that way. Disconnecting from the workload and the stress is also really, really important. If you were surrounded by your problems all of the time, we get this tunnel vision, and pretty soon it's impossible to find solutions because it's almost like we're trying to wade through the mud or the manure, right? So you don't have to take a big vacation. Go for a drive, have a coffee with a friend, go play a round of golf, go play cards, take a walk. That is a doozy. Just go move your body and do something where your mind frame is different than focused on the problems of the farm. Adding those positive activities separate from the farm is really important in a lot of ways. It also helps you have something more to your identity than farming, because at some point in time, you may want to retire. And a lot of times producers have a hard time retiring because they don't know who they are once they're no longer a farmer. Another thing that really impacts transition is wondering or recognizing whose expectations are guiding your operation. So on our farm, we're a multi-generational farm, and we have 3 active generations right now on the farm. Yes, that makes for some very interesting days. So my mother and father-in-law, I would call the let it go generation. So they are in their 80s, still part of the decision-making process. They're still out there wanting to do the work. At the same time, though, they're wanting to step back from full days of labor, which is, thank goodness. And they have different expectations or needs or wants from the farm than, say, I do and my husband, which is the middle generation. And we also have different hopes, expectations, and needs than, say, our upcoming generation, our kids and our niece and our nephew. So it's really important when you are going through transition that each person recognizes where they are in the transition process, what they want, what they need, and what their hopes are for the farm. And that helps communication big time. Another thing that we do is set ourselves up for failure because our expectations are really unrealistic. So we've got unrealistic expectations between the generations or between you and your coworkers. We also have poor communication in thinking that common sense exists. Common sense does not exist. It is actually learning through situational exposure. So think of it as this way. If you had a person who had never set foot on your farm and suddenly they came to work with you and you told them to go move the heifers and they didn't know what a heifer was, is that common sense? It's not, because the person hasn't had a chance to learn about it. The other thing we do, which kind of sets us up for failure, is creating these massive to-do lists, which actually impacts us neurologically. I encourage you, instead of like having a to-do list, have a ta-da list, which means that you write down the 1 or 2 things in your morning that you will actually get done. So when I'm working with someone who's experiencing severe depression, their ta-da list has get out of bed, brush teeth, change out of pajamas. And when they do those 3 things and they cross them off, there's actually a neurological reaction that occurs, and they experience a hit of dopamine, and that helps them, and that actually keeps them propelled and going forward and motivated. It's the same thing in the farming world. It's also easier to recognize your successes after doing the ta-das. Number 1 cause of challenges on the farm, transition, succession, the day-to-day, is communication, right? You might have really good communication, you might have really bad. Most farm families that I've experienced has this model of communication, which, yes, that's a manure spreader, and the other one is a sponge, like a sitting duck sponge. In a lot of farm families, there are 1 or 2 individuals, when they experience distress or they're upset, they kind of do this, I'm sorry, I'm going to swear for a second, but we call it in our family shit flinging. So someone will come in and they'll be really upset and they just like rah and dump it on everybody else. and it kind of ruins everyone else's day, or everyone tiptoes around other people. And that is quite common in the agricultural world. And for those around them, we kind of end up absorbing it, right? So one thing I'd like you to think about by the end of this presentation is, which one are you? Are you a manure spreader, or are you a sitting duck sponge? And maybe you're neither, and that would be fantastic. Here are some communication styles. You might not communicate at all. You might have good communication. You may do the like fighting constantly, or where one person kind of berates the other one and just the other person takes it. Or there is the strong silent type who refuses to communicate. Or there's this one, the triangular communication, where typically it's a parent at the top and then two siblings on either side. And so the siblings don't communicate with each other, they communicate with the parent. This becomes very detrimental, or like makes it transition very difficult. I am going to encourage everybody to get out your cell phones if you have one, and take pictures of these remaining slides, because there's a lot of information on them, and you may want to look back at it, and we can talk about this all you want in a little bit here. But in order to break the cycles, there's some things that we need to do. So the first one is do the dang self-maintenance, just like you would maintain your machinery, right? Your machinery is worth a lot of money. And without it, it's hard to have a successful farming operation. Well, guess what? Your body is your number one asset, and your brain, your number one piece of equipment that you need. So please maintain it as much as you maintain the rest of your machinery. When you are rested, hydrated, and fueled, you are better able to handle your emotions, handle the anger, handle the workload, handle communicating. We make way better decisions. There are also less farm accidents, and that is a big one. And there is a lot of research out there on that. Sometimes when we take that break from the stress and the workload, it really does improve our ability to maintain our perspective, and it improves our problem-solving ability. So I really encourage you, the next time that you have a problem, like say, I'll use cattle because that's my background. Say you have your family, you're all out there and you're sorting cattle, and everybody's getting upset and the cows are getting worked up. The best thing to do is take 15 minutes, everybody walk away from each other, drink a bottle of water, have a snack, and just take a break. Like go stare at your pasture. Don't talk to each other, and then come back. Even taking that break, resetting your body, you will work better, your coworkers will work better together, or your family members, and the cows will also work better because you're not kind of forcing your energy and your stuff onto them. Makes a huge difference, huge difference. Another thing is to reflect and really be factual. So human beings, we are so good at lying to ourselves. My gosh. Like how many times have you ever said to yourself, I can't do this. I can't do this anymore. You outright told a lie to yourself. Why? Because whatever it is you think you can't do, you've already been doing it 100% successfully. Like you are 100% successful at getting through the tough times. You are 100% successful of handling what's been thrown at you because you're sitting in that chair watching this right now. So stop lying to yourself. That might sound a bit harsh. The other thing is we create all these problems for our brain when we blurt out these really abstract statements that have no meaning. So when you say, I can't do this, what is this? Like, what are you referring to? Because your brain doesn't know, so it can't solve the problem. Like, are you saying you can't trim your toenails anymore? Are you saying like, I can't feed myself anymore, or I can't wash my hair? That might sound really silly, but your brain literally has no clue what you're talking about. So be really concrete. What is stressing you? What is the problem? What parts do you have influence or control over? Break it down really small, because if you are looking at your problems like this huge mountain, well, of course it feels insurmountable. Of course it feels like you can't get through it. But that mountain literally is pebbles put together, all these pebbles. So take your problems apart, one pebble at a time. And the other piece is be patient. So in the agriculture world, typically we've farmed with our families, right? So you've learned your coping skills, your habits, so our habitual reactions to stress. Typically in the farm world, the number one used or common emotion is anger, right? Well, if you watched a parent deal with a stressful situation by being really angry and lashing out, well, that's what you've learned, okay? And I'm not laying fault, because these generations go through over years and years and years. So you're not only learning about your coping patterns, like you're literally recognizing patterns that have occurred over many generations, typically. So be patient with yourself. Start checking in with yourself and recognize, like, if you hear yourself yelling at your family and you note, like, oh gosh, I'm yelling, stop. It's okay. Your family won't mind that you stopped yelling at them. But take note of that. Recognize what occurred for you to be upset, and you will notice a pattern. We are creatures of habit. And the only way to change those habits is to recognize it and start working on it.
Cynthia, another question came up.
Yeah.
Someone said, what happens if you are the only one implementing these and the other parties are being stubborn?
Oh, what a great question. So one thing that I really encourage families to do is, if you have one individual in the family who has started working on themselves, I'll be honest, it's going to be uncomfortable, but nobody died from uncomfortable, right? And we've gotten through difficult things before. So let people know, hey, even if you want to blame it on me, okay, lay responsibility with me. Hey, I saw this lady on this Young Farmer Summit, and she was saying that, it's really important that we start doing that. So I'm kind of noticing that. So use that language. I'm noticing that when the cows get out, I get really angry and I take it out on you guys. And I'm sorry for that, and I'm trying to change. The other piece you can say is, I'm noticing that when the cows get out, the stress level really goes up around here. And I'm wondering if we all could think about how we're reacting. Is there another way we could do this? Because the anger really isn't productive. So it's okay to make note that you are working on changing, and then try to highlight that to other people, that there's other ways of operating or coping. Most people have no clue that their habits, like, other people see it outside of themselves, right? Our family sees it way before we do. So you can try having those conversations. Or you can discreetly, print off information from some of these resources and leave it laying on the kitchen table and hope that people notice it. Or some organizations have magnets you can get. And I know a lot of people who've hung these magnets or stuck them on the inside of their farm machinery, actually, which has proven to be pretty effective, because when you are going around and around, a lot of people are looking on their cell phone or using their cell phone to look at information. So feel free to take these pictures. These are free cognitive health resources that are available across Canada. And they have some excellent information available. I have another page here, and I'm just going to change it. Hopefully everybody's taken a picture. This Men's Health Foundation, the Dudes Club, and the Men's Shed of Canada, some very interesting information available. Canadian Centre for Agricultural Wellbeing is doing some really great things as well, as is Do More Agriculture, and then the Canadian Centre for Rural and Agricultural Health out of the University of Saskatchewan also has some really interesting information available. So hopefully you've had a chance to take those pictures. So if you take anything away from this, I hope that you recognize that doing the self-maintenance of drinking some water in the morning, eating some food, and taking food and water with you when you go out to do your work in like outside, just doing those two things you will see changes within a couple weeks. Literally, like I challenge you to go do that experiment. Drink some water, take the water with you, eat some food. Do you get hangry? Are you better able to regulate your emotions? Are there less screw ups on the farm just from drinking water and eating some food in the morning? Like goodness. Also recognize how much more productive you are. Try to get some sleep. Even 7 hours of sleep is what we need. Like as adults, 7 hours of sleep is all we need. Some days we're going to need more, some days we'll need less. Take a break from the stress, add some positive activities, and hopefully talk to a trusted person. So it is always the right time to reach out for cognitive health supports, like talking to a counselor. And when you look for a counselor, you may have to look for them the same way that you want to choose a bull for breeding your cows, okay? So if you bought a bull, used the bull on your cows, and you had a wreck at calving time, I'm sure you wouldn't say to yourself, oh, I am never using a bull again to breed my cows. If that actually went through your mind, then you need to call me because there's some really big problems there because you'll go bankrupt when your cows aren't bred. What you would say is, I'm not using that bull, I'll try a different bull. It's the same thing when you're finding a therapist. You might have to try a few different ones to find the person that is the right fit for you. Most professionals, whether they're a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a registered counselor, they will give you a free 15-minute consult, like a meet and greet, so that you can know if you're a right fit. The last thing I would like to say, and I'd like to thank you for being here and prioritizing your learning today. Before when I asked you to think about if thinking in your community, if there was someone who is kind of like that old grouchy person who is really negative all the time. Just some food for thought. If no one came to mind, is it you? Are you the person that might be viewed as like the negative person in the community? And if so, the great news is that's pretty easy to start working on. And that's about all that I have, Sage. Is there any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much, Cynthia. We did have another question come up here. It's a pretty specific question. What do you do when you're taking a few hours here and there during the summer to go fishing with your kids, and it is used as a hammer to bludgeon you in a family meeting to paint you as not as committed to the farm as your dad was, constantly feeling a source of criticism from the older generation, even though we never take a vacation?
Right. That is a great question, and you are not alone with that experience. That is a point that is brought to me quite often. I strongly encourage people to be really direct when communicating, and being direct and respectful is different than being direct and disrespectful. So when you are having those conversations, you can say, I'm prioritizing myself, number one, so that I can prioritize the farm better. When I'm well, the farm is well. When I'm healthy, the farm is healthier. Your way of doing things was your way of doing things, and we're learning as we grow. My behavior will not be changing, but my commitment to the farm is not any less. My family, though, does mean as much or more to me than the farm does. And that might be different than when you were, my age. It's okay to say that. It's also okay to say, I appreciate your point of view. However, I will not be disrespected that way. We're two different people.
That's a really great answer. I think so many people in the farming and ranching community feel you never get away from your job. You are living at your job, right? If something goes wrong in the middle of the night, guess what? You're at work. You are there to fix it. And we know that that can be quite stressful on families when you're essentially living at your work. So, Cynthia, I can't tell you how much of an honor it is to get to know you and all the amazing you do for the ranching and farming community. You're a wealth of knowledge, and we're just so honored to get to hear from you today. And what Cynthia said, those resources, they will be in an email after the event. So you can have that contacts on mental health and wellness, which we know is really important to have. So again, thank you, Cynthia, for your time today. We really appreciate you taking the time, not only out of your busy schedule as a psychologist, but your busy ranching schedule. So thank you.
Thank you, Sage.
All right. So before I introduce the next speaker, we do have another poll in the polling tab. So if you could please let us know, do you have a will? And while you're answering that polling question, I thought I would share the results from our first poll. We had the number one was picking rocks as your least favorite farm chore. We had number two, very close. It was number one at one point, and then it went to number two was paperwork, and the number three was weeding fences. I know myself that picking rocks was and is my least favorite because my mom and dad, when I was bad as a kid, that was my farm punishment. I had to go out and pick rocks, and there's nothing like a day of picking rocks to make you question your life decisions. So please answer that polling question if you have a will, because our second speaker is going to be talking about one of the hottest topics for you all today, and that is going to be farm transition. Whether you are just starting your journey into transition planning, or you are closing one chapter of that plan and moving on to the next, we really, truly can all use some tips, advice, and shared stories from other producers around this vital piece of business planning. So we are so excited to be welcoming Dr. Tom Deans. He is an acclaimed author of three best-selling books on family wealth transfer, including Everyone's Family Business and Willing Wisdom. His latest book, which I have had the honor of reading, and it is phenomenal, is The Happy Inheritor, which some of you will win after today's event. And this book explores how successful families prepare heirs and transfer wealth with transparency and, surprisingly, joy. Tom and I are going to be having a chat. So this is going to be really exciting. We're going to be discussing some really important topics. But if you do have any questions, please, we would love for you to share that in the chats. We know it's so important and so many people have questions about that. We just got the polling results in. If you do have a will, 42% of you said yes and 58% of you said no. That is very interesting. So could you please welcome Dr. Tom Deans with me here at the Farmer Summit. Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy travel schedule to join us today.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. And I just got to tell you, I listened to the whole presentation by Cynthia. That was fantastic. I'd actually heard her speak, but there's always something new that I learn every time I hear her. So, and it's such a great dovetail. There's a lot of overlap between mental health and farm transition. This is a deep, emotional, and tricky subject. So I'm super excited to dive in and offer some really practical tips and tools and ideas to help young farmers navigate what I think is the toughest issue on any farm.
Yeah, it really is. And we have a lot of young farmers and ranchers with us today. And as I mentioned, I am a young rancher myself, and I can tell you that genuinely, I just want to know genuinely, how do farm families, how are they doing right now with this formal succession plan? Do you see a lot of farm families having a succession plan, or how does that look?
Yeah, so it's, I don't want to start off by being a kind of a downer Debbie, but listen, there's 189,000 farms in Canada, and 125,000 of those farming families, don't have a formal farm transition plan. So the quick math tells me that's 64,000 that do, but even the majority of the 64,000 farming families that do have sat down, talked about this, they don't actually have a formal plan. They actually have a verbal plan. So this is where maybe a young farmer is, out of frustration, maybe said to their parent, look, mom, dad, listen, I'm 42 years old. I need some clarity. Like, when do I get the farm? Like, when do I get to make the decisions? You keep overriding me. I need to know what my path is to farm ownership. And so in those cases, 64,000 times, you're getting a kind of like a verbal promise, like, you know what, relax, Junior. One day all this will be yours. So how many of the 189,000 actually have a 1-page, 2-page written formal farm transition agreement? I'm going to say 10 farmers in Canada. Like,
Wow.
It's a tiny, tiny number. Most of us push off, procrastinate. I don't know. We think that verbal agreement is going to be good enough. But the reality is, as time marches on, people are, young farmers are looking for more. They're looking for more clarity. And if they don't get it, tragically, they quit.
So are you telling me that, people quitting, are we losing a lot of wealth in the farming and ranching community? Is it just not being transitioned? What's going on with that if we don't have these plans?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So what happens is, you can imagine that young farmer moves into their 30s, moves into their 40s out of frustration. Every time they raise the subject, it gets shut down. And so, young people grow up. Young people grow up, they individualize from their parents, they leave the farm, and they leave their parents high and dry. And maybe they go up and set up a competing farm down the road, which is sad when you think of the lost opportunity that could have happened if there was a kind of a calm, orderly transition to the family farm. So, or they leave farming altogether out of frustration.
Yeah,
they can't afford the land, they can't afford, they've lost too much time, they've dedicated too much time to their parents' farm, and they run out of time. And that of course is tragic. So
is there a right time though? Like, what is the right time? You saying that you have to have these transition talks, but what is the right time? Is there a right time? Is there a right age? What does that kind of look like?
What time is it right now, Sage?
It's the present.
Right now. Right now.
Okay.
It's the right time. Like, not tomorrow.
Okay.
Because if even after this call is over, people are going to go, oh my gosh, it's my mother and father. I mean, the parents that raised me, I was taught to have so much respect for them. It just feels so dishonorable and rude to raise this subject. It's awkward because we're talking about money and a shift in control. We're just conditioned, right? That what we have family intertwined with business, and it feels all muddled up and chaotic. It feels so overwhelming that what do? We find that we'll leave it for tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and we find another reason to push it off another day, another week, another month, another year. And then time passes on. And then these young farmers get married, they have their own families, and their priorities should shift to taking care of their own families, but they have this dual loyalty to their own parents, even grandparents. And so this conversation, the longer it's delayed, the longer they procrastinate, the harder it gets, the older they get, and then we move into the frustration phase. And that is really devastating to watch young farmers just quit. So
yeah, especially, things can be really overwhelming too if you have, parents, they've been farming, they took over the farm from their parents. They had 4 kids. What do you do when you have 4 kids? Let's say 2 of them are on the farm, 2 of them are off the farm, 1 of them's on the farm, 3 of them are off the farm. What does that look like with family and wealth transition with the family farm?
That is such a great question. I'll tell you why. It really brings into focus how things have changed. So back in the 1940s and 1950s, even the 1960s, bigger families, not 2 kids, 4 kids, 6 kids, 8 kids. It was likely that 1 or 2 would stay on the farm and maybe 1 or 2 would go off farm. But now, fast forward into the 80s and the 90s, even in the early 2000s, those kids, those families, they had 2 kids. And fast forward 25 years now, you've got young farmers and you've got 1 on the farm and 1 off the farm. And then you've got huge appreciation in land values. You don't have a farm that's worth 1 million. You got a farm that's worth 10 million. And you've got 1 brother or sister off the farm, 1 on the farm. So it used to be, I don't know, oldest boy, they'd get everything. And their brothers and sisters off the farm, they'd get nothing. Well, guess what? Now that farm's worth 3 million, 8 million, 12 million, 120 million. The farm values have gone up. Now children off the farm really want a piece of that inheritance. If there's been no family conversation, maybe false promises. I'm going to get into people who make false promises about what they're going to get. And then what we're finding right now is that right across the country, there are families in court, in litigation, fighting. The courts are full of families fighting over farms, dairy farms, cattle farms, crop farms, and it's just devastating. And there's one piece of data that I had to look really hard for. I actually couldn't find it. I actually had to do fundamental research. I had to research, called and interviewed dozens and dozens and dozens of litigation lawyers to find out the real cost of a farming family that ends up in court. So here it is, Sage, here's the number. If a young farmer ends up, so remember, women on average live 6 years longer than men. So guys, we die first. Family farm transitions to mom. Mom lives an extra 6 years. She dies. And then if there's no will, that farm is going to come down and thrust brothers and sisters into business together, in many cases as equal partners. So wow. Yeah. And that's a really devastating situation, because the children, what do the children off the farm want from their brother or sister who are on the farm? What do they want right away?
It rhymes with funny, doesn't it?
It does rhyme with funny. And guess what? It's not very funny.
No, it's not.
It's money and it's cash. They don't want they don't want to be put on the payment plan. They want their piece of the $4 million farm.
Yeah.
Like that. Now, while that's happening, the children who are now in business together are getting a letter from CRA, the tax man, and that tax letter is saying, hey kids, you owe us this. What do you think this is, Sage?
It's not a good number.
Now, farms transition, there's some tax provisions that allow farming families to transition assets a little more favorably than other types of business, but there are still lots of family assets that are subject to the full whack, the full capital gains. And so there's huge tax bills. So there's been no family conversations, no family planning, no drafting of wills and sharing of wills and preparation of the heirs, the next generation. These tax letters, these tax bills that these inheritors are getting are devastating. And so where do the kids go for cash to pay their tax bill? They often reach into the farming operation for cash to pay their personal tax bill. And guess what? We all know this in farming. Asset rich, but cash flow is always a challenge, right? Especially after you've just bought all your inputs and you're waiting to be paid for your commodity. Like, it's just unbelievable. So in many cases, the cash isn't there. So what does maybe one child who wants to own the farm have to do in order to pay out their brothers and sisters? They got to sell land.
Yeah, they're going to have to sell the farm. Yeah.
And a chunk of it.
And another thing, we just got a question in, and I think this is, such an important question. And I know you're going to be talking about it, and I know you get it a lot. The question is, my husband wishes his parents would commit to transition planning, but they aren't budging. And he's resorted to just putting up with their disorganization. What advice would you give someone married into a farm and feels their spouse is being pushed around by the stubborn in-laws?
So, wow, this is a great question, because
yeah, it is.
It is cutting right to the heart of the matter. So first of all, let me back up before I answer that, because it's going to give a little more context to this question. We know that, 30 years ago, farmers, guys, would have a heart attack at 72 and die. The mortality rate of men was 72. And then mom would live 6 years longer, so die at 78. So we had young farmers in their late 40s, early 50s getting the farm when their last parent died. Well, here's the problem with that little strategy. Parents are living longer. I mean, this is great news, right? Our healthcare system, despite all of its flaws, are still pushing out mortality dates. So the average male is living to 86. Women are living another 6 years longer. Like finding people in their late 80s and 90s is very common now. So if you have a certain personality type that wants to retain control over the family farm well into their 90s, do the math. Sage, that young farmer is going to be in their 60s.
Wow.
Or early 70s when their parents die. They're
Wow.
not going to be looking for clarification from their parents on when they get control. They're just going to be looking for permission to retire.
Mm-hmm.
It's not working. It's not working. So we need young farmers to be able to explain that to their parents and say to them, what worked for your generation is not going to work for me. I am not waiting till I'm 63 years old to finally be able to pick that particular tractor, but not that one. To plant that crop, but not that one. To time the sale and go with that futures contract, but not that one. Like, they are just frustrated. They want, and it's completely legitimate, they want exactly what their parents wanted when they were their age.
Right.
And it's more than just money.
Yeah.
It's independence. It's freedom. It's their own sovereignty to grow up and take care of their own family.
Yeah, and I know you also mentioned in your book, The Happy Inheritor, you really talk about the importance of having those family meetings. Like that question said, maybe that's what needs to happen, is we need to have a family meeting here. How do you bring that up? What does that meeting look like? I know it can be pretty awkward. So what does that look like?
Well, I guarantee it will be awkward.
Mm-hmm.
They are awkward because for many of the people listening to this call right now, they've never had a family meeting. What they've had is a parent who has one conversation with one brother or sister separately, and then has another separate conversation with another brother and sister. And in many cases, those conversations are just slightly different. Or in the most unhealthy situation, they're completely different. In other words, someone who is suffering from a certain personality disorder, which I know we're going to dive into, is going to be dishonest and say to their eldest son, yeah, you're going to get the farm. You've worked the hardest, you're going to get the farm. And then they go over to another sibling, their brother or sister, and say, you know what? I don't know if you know this, but I think you've worked the hardest. You're going to get the farm. And Cynthia referred to this personality type or style as triangulation. That's a triangle. That's where three people are having really two different conversations, and it's really unhealthy. It's incredibly disruptive, and it will destroy families from the inside out. Over time, brothers and sisters piece together the dishonesty. They piece together the duplicity, and they feel betrayed. So it's hard to imagine that a parent would treat their children that way, right?
That is, yeah.
But it represents about 20% of the population who suffer from one of the 10
Wow.
personality disorders that are listed in the DSM-5, which is fancy way of saying it's the diagnostic and statistical manual that clinicians use to diagnose people with personality disorders, people that you and I would describe as difficult people.
Yeah. So what do you do with these difficult people? You have someone with one of these personality disorders. What do you do with it if they're not even approachable? Are they so stubborn they just close you off entirely? What do you do there?
Yeah, so listen, so if people have an inkling about this is what they're dealing with, really don't try to navigate this on your own. Cynthia offered some really great resources. Take full advantage of those, because you're going to be dealing with one of the trickiest things in business, and that is trying to navigate. You're going to try to navigate and negotiate in good faith with someone you love.
Mm-hmm.
Someone you think would treat you with reciprocity and honesty and kindness and empathy, all the things that are values that are alive in families. But what you're going to be dealing with is someone that is really driven by, particularly if you're the narcissist, is someone who's completely driven by control.
Mm.
They will control their family. They will
Yeah.
control anyone in their orbit, in their community, if they're involved in the church. Like, these are difficult people that always have to be up in everyone's business. And it's really, really debilitating for a young person to navigate that. So I would say reach out for some help. There's some phenomenal resources. Read The Happy Inheritor, because I'll
Yes.
give people, like, it's a primer, but it's just scratching the surface. There's really, you want to get some professional help to help you navigate these relationships. And then we are so blessed to be able to live in a time on this planet where there are so many phenomenal free resources online.
Mm-hmm.
And I would point people in the direction of Dr. Ramani on YouTube, and that's Ramani. But she is one of many online clinical psychologists that will really break down these challenging personality types that are frustrating young business owners who every time they try to raise the subject, they get kind of swatted down, or even worse, they get told that they're being rude, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like a family was like, hey, in this family, Sage, we don't talk about money. You just relax, you mind your own business, you stay in your own lane. When this farm is ready to transition, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's so hard. And I think even another way is, reading your book is so important too. But hey, maybe say, Mom and Dad or Grandpa and Grandma, I have this book. I think you'll find it very valuable. And it's not a direct way of saying, let's talk. So maybe they might get some tips from your book about, hey, maybe it's important we have these family meetings before someone is in the hospital or before, you're at a funeral, right? Because what happens in those situations?
Right, exactly. No, that's a really good point. In fact, I would say to the people listening in today, one of the great ways to see kind of what you're dealing with is to go. And so we have the poll said 42% of the people today listening in have a will. So for the other people who don't, listen, if there's only one takeaway from today's presentation, please get organized. You need this document. But getting the document, the will, and your power of attorney for healthcare and your power of attorney for finance, you need 3 documents that make up an estate plan. Once you get these documents in place, here's an interesting thing. You can then go to your parents and share these documents with your parents. It's really weird because what you're going to be doing is parenting your parent. You're going to be saying to your parents, look, I'm going to be traveling on a plane. I'm going to Toronto. I'm going to fly to Florida. If something happens to me, I don't have a lot of wealth, but you should have my documents. And so I tell young farmers all the time, pay attention to what happens. In the vast majority of cases, there's reciprocity. The parent will say, geez, you should probably have a copy of our will. Like, I don't know why we haven't shared it, and it's good that we're having this conversation. So Sage, I've just been talking about the narcissist,
Yeah.
and the other 10 personality disorders, which is 20% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, 80% of parents are kind, decent people. They don't want their children just to be successful farmers. They want them to be even more successful than themselves. Like there is that kind of gratitude and kindness. That's most parents. So when I talk about this kind of dysfunctional part, I always like to make sure that there's some context, right? That the vast majority of people are dealing with, maybe parents that are kind of awkward around the subject of talking about money, but when you present them with your will, they'll reciprocate. And that's always a first clue that you're starting down that kind of healthy path to start talking about money in a healthy way and kind of demystifying money and taking away all the kind of the scary stuff. Because listen, you and I know that the vast majority of people will find out about what they inherit
after
they find out at the funeral home. So the funeral home, not a lawyer's office, but the funeral home is where someone in the family pulls out a copy of the will. And it's often the oldest boy, tradition, kind of weird. And it's causing some big problems. So while people are grieving, so first of all, let me back up. Why the funeral home? The will names the executor. The executor has the legal authority to implement final wishes. So that's why the will's getting pulled out at the funeral home.
That's an awful place for it to be pulled out. That's horrible.
And in the will, it describes who gets the farm. So while people are grieving, they're finding out how the farm transition plan is going to unfold for the first time. In the vast majority of the cases, remember, 189,000 farms in Canada and 125,000 people have no formal succession plan. We also know that half of all farmers don't have a will.
Well, and while people are grieving, right? While people are grieving, are they making the best decisions for that farm or ranch? What have you seen?
Absolutely not. They're emotional. They're in a heightened state. And so they're making emotional decisions.
Yeah.
And of course, all we need to know at the reading of that will at the funeral home is that someone got more, someone got left, someone's aggrieved, someone's angry, and then someone hires a lawyer. And now we're on that path to $500,000 per person in a family to get to a one-day trial to fight over ownership of the family farm. 500, you got 4 kids, you got 4 lawyers at 500. Actually, you got 5 lawyers. The estate has a lawyer too. I'm seeing farms worth $3, $4, $5, $10 million being ground down to the big donut. There's nothing left after the lawyers mop the floor.
That's insane. This topic is hot. You know how I know this? Because we are getting so many questions right now that are just rolling in. So I think we need to address these questions real quick.
Breaking the internet?
We're breaking the internet. So, we just know that this is an issue in the farming and ranching community. We are losing farms and ranches because of farm transition problems. So here's a question for you. Going on 15 years of farming for nothing but the promise of moving forward, did a succession plan 10 years ago, but no progress in real life. My kids are losing hope of farming and seeking a future off the farm because grandpa won't agree to a written plan.
Okay, so this is going to sound harsh. This is going to sound very harsh. But in a non-family business, if, say, you and I, Sage, work for Coca-Cola, or we work for a corporation, it's not family owned. We go to the office, we go to that place of business, we trade our time for a salary. One day we decide we want to own that business. And so we talk to the owner, we make an offer, we negotiate, there's a written agreement. If that agreement is not made or met or honored, Sage, what are you and I going to do?
Leave?
We're going to leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what happens on a family farm? The heartstrings, that it feels disloyal, it feels mean-spirited, it feels like we don't love our parents.
Yeah.
But really what I describe in the book is this idea that we have to individualize and separate from our parents. As we start our own families, we have to shift our priorities from our parents to our own family. We have a financial responsibility to raise and take care of our own children. So you
Yeah.
can see what it feels like to be the luncheon meat in an intergenerational sandwich where we feel a commitment to our own children and a commitment to our parents. But at some point, the priority has to shift to our own family. And so when someone can say to their parents, listen, this is where I'm at in my life. If I don't receive clarity on a path forward on this day, on these terms, I'm afraid that I'm going to have to give you notice and leave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is a psychological term called infantilization. This is where parents treat their children as adolescents, even when they're 60 years old. The children, they never allow their children to, in their own mind's eye, to grow up and be independent. So if that's what's going on, if we're allowing ourselves to be infantilized, to be treated like an adolescent, to never really grow up and really demand our sovereignty, then this is what will happen. Succession plans will be stifled, they'll be delayed, or even worse, they'll never be discussed at all. And then we rely on something to be the foundation of our succession plan. It's called hope. And Sage, hope is not a plan.
No, it's not. No. This question that just rolled in, it's a great one. Would you say you see more and more families and farms using third parties to help with creating a succession plan or a transition plan?
All day long. Biggest trend.
Yeah.
All day long. This is not something I would recommend people do actually on their own.
Okay, that's good to know.
What can happen is a young farmer will use the same accountant or lawyer as their parents. Well, like that lawyer and accountant is conflicted. If you really want to put together a detailed plan to acquire control of the family farm, like get your own independent advice. This is part of what it means as, like when I say individualized from your parents, that's a good practical example of saying, hey, sure, we're a family, but I'm about to become an independent farmer of you. So I need independent advice.
Yeah, I think that's so good to have a third party because, sometimes farms and ranches are a little bit more emotional than outside businesses because, like I said earlier, you're living at your business. You have a connection to the land, to your animals, and that's an emotional connection, and things can get really heightened emotionally, and we just know how hard that can be. So I love your advice about that third party. Another question that just rolled in, any advice for a family that has a huge age gap in the next generation, brothers age 37 and 12, being told they will someday inherit the same amount of the land, but the father's 70? That's a big age gap. What do you have for that?
Yeah, so, well, if something happens in the next 6 years, the 12-year-old is their shares would be inherited and put in a trust. So minors he wouldn't actually be thrust into business and find himself in a meeting talking about what crop to plant with a 12-year-old. So they would have to be 18 before they inherit the actual shares themselves. So, but they would be put into business with the trustee of those shares.
Okay. Yeah. So you would say kind of have that ready, like the third party would come into there?
Very much so. And
okay.
So a lot of people are turning to wealth advisors to manage or act as a third-party family meeting facilitator.
Right.
So wealth advisors are starting to get trained, often look for an FEA, Family Enterprise Advisor. So there's a professional designation. And these advisors are right across the country. They're in every community. Look for that designation. And so wealth advisors, listen, they don't want to see a family end up in court. So they really want to bring the generations together and manage and kind of massage those conversations and keep the family on track.
Yeah, that's really great. You mentioned that. This other question is, I was not born into farming. I am the first generation. What would you suggest for me to set up while I have only just started my family? Things I can do right from the very beginning.
Well, one of the greatest gifts we can give our family, our children, is the freedom and the independence to be the people we want to be. And that sounds a little counterintuitive. There's a strong theme in business succession planning, farm succession planning, that the only honorable path is for the next generation to take over the family farm. And so what I would say to that person is just be very mindful that she or he has joined a farm, taken over a farm, bought a farm as a first generation, as a founder, because they were drawn to that particular endeavor. It's a passion. But not all children share that same dream. And so I always just say to every parent, just be mindful that your dreams are not your children's dreams. And so to give that freedom and independence of the next generation to pursue an endeavor that is honorable to them. There's some of the worst farm transitions are when we apply guilt and a sense of duty for the next generation to continue to do what the family has always done, which is farm for generations. That putting people in those positions is going to guarantee that the business probably won't survive or certainly won't perform, and people won't enjoy their lives. So again, the greatest gift we can give our children is freedom to be not a version of ourselves, but their authentic selves.
Yeah, I love that answer.
That can be explored in a family meeting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What do you guys see? What does the future kind of look like? I know your answer to this question already, Tom, but when is the best time to make a will? Or a better yet, what milestone should you hit to start a will?
Okay, so if you're 18, you need a will. 18 or older. Yeah. When you're 18, you're not, well, first of all, you're not a kid. You're an adult. There is no area of the law that says you're a young adult. There's no thing called young adult law. So we know from that Humboldt bus accident in 2018, and so many young people were injured. Like 13 of the 16 people who died in that awful crash on the prairies were between the ages of 18 and 29. So what was happening? Parents were arriving at the local hospital and they were being asked to produce copies of their children's wills because that would give them authority to find out how their kids were doing. They were bumping into privacy laws. So we always think that estate planning and wills is just for like people in their 70s or 80s or when you're just about to die. The reality is if you're over 18, it's not about having a lot of money. It's about actually getting a will. When you get a will done, you get the power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for finance. You need all three of those documents. Doesn't matter how old you are. So the quick answer is, if there's only one thing you do when you hang up right now or shortly, call a lawyer and book an appointment. Even if that is a week or two out or 3 weeks out, book that appointment today, right now. That is the homework. That's the big takeaway from today's presentation.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. I have another one that came in. How do you exit yourself from a family farm where your dad won't acknowledge 10 years of unpaid family labor and sweat equity and won't make a plan to move forward? Having no record of income, all savings invested in the farm, living off side job money only.
I would say read The Happy Inheritor. Read the first 4 chapters of that book. So that's going to take you about 45 minutes to an hour. These are not long books. And by the way, they're not even academic books. They're actually a story. I've made it kind of entertaining. But those first 4 chapters will give you some clues on what you're dealing with. And then govern yourself accordingly. I think you're going to find those first 4 chapters really illuminating. You could be dealing with one of these personality types that prioritize themselves and, quite frankly, just don't give a damn about their family. It's unbelievable. It's hard to imagine that people will exploit their children to the extent that they do, but there is a percentage of farmers that will.
Yeah, we often see it in the, because you're living at your business, right? And it's pretty easy to say, hey, get up and go do this. There's many hours that go into farming and ranching that aren't necessarily written down. So yeah, thank you for that. I know I've read your book and there can be a lot of questions answered within those first 4 chapters. The next question here, how do you succession plan in the circumstances when one of the parents have poor mental health? All the warning signs from Cynthia's presentations.
Yeah. So to echo kind of what I just said, first of all, be very mindful that this is one of the most I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Um, we have, there are just so many repercussions of growing up in a home, in a business with people who are not, who are unwell. And, and so you really need to take care of yourself and there is no shame. And it is not a public acknowledgement of weakness to look for help and get support, because you're dealing with one of the most, no, you're dealing with the most difficult thing in life. And that is real uncertainty.
Mm.
Real uncertainty. And it feels impossible to navigate on your own. But there are lots of books and resources to help people, survivors of narcissistic abuse. And there's no other word to describe it, but it is abuse, where people, parents misuse their privilege, misuse their position in life to exploit their children. Get help. Get help. It's not weak. It's not a sign of weakness. And you can pop out the other end. And when you do, man, the world is your oyster. You will go off and accomplish incredible things. Just having survived that will give you extraordinary insights into other types of businesses or even farming. But
So true.
the earlier you can find out what you're dealing with, the better. And then you can make adult decisions and go off and live a pretty fantastic life.
Yeah, that is so true, that everything you learn on the ranch and farm, that you can really take that and apply it to any business. There's some big titles about working on the farm and ranch. You're the CEO, CFO, right? There's some big titles you can put on your resume.
I'm glad, listen, I do speaking in all sorts of industries, auto dealerships, restaurant associations, manufacturing associations. I can tell you, and I was a CEO of a large manufacturing company, I can tell you that when I saw on a resume, farmhand, farm supervisor, farmer, oh man, they are workers. They are hard workers, self-starters.
Yeah.
So if you found yourself in this kind of family situation and you're frustrated and you're dealing with turmoil, listen, that is not the end of life. That is the beginning. People, we love farmers. Employers love you. They want you.
Yeah, I definitely know, even on my resume saying I grew up on a ranch, people are like, wow, that must have been how you knew to become an Olympic athlete. You had to work so hard. And I'm like, yes, it is. Growing up on the ranch and being on your family's farm or ranch, that really teaches you a lot of different skills that you can take on to any career path you might choose. A few more questions for you, Tom. For a family farm starting to transition to the next generation, how do you start to divide up each child's start to make an income?
So in my first book, Every Family's Business, I talk about the importance in farming and in absolutely every business. It's really important to have proper job descriptions and actual performance reviews so that people are paid market rates. I mean, that prior question where someone has worked for 10 years for no wage, that is not how modern farms are run. So this notion of, you can see what's happened in that situation, right? How do you come up with an accurate accounting of the value of that labor over the course of 10 years? So what parents will say in an unhealthy situation, oh, that's sweat equity. There's no legal definition of what sweat equity is. It's vague. It hasn't been done in a proper professional or business-like way. So I'd say to everyone, proper job descriptions, even for especially for young farmers, job descriptions. Where does your job begin and end? And it might be broad, and you may have to have flexible work hours, but there also needs to be provisions for holidays, right? We heard that other question in Cynthia's presentation about, going fishing and, getting an earful while, about your lack of commitment. Listen, in every other industry, employees negotiate with employers for working conditions, payment, holidays. These are not outrageous requests. This is how proper professional businesses are run.
Yeah, and I will argue with you a little bit on that one. They say you should enjoy, love working with animals. That should be your passion. That should be what you are. So, that's really tough on the farm when, you can't take the vacation when everyone wants to take because you're stuck working the farm, or your parents take the vacation, but you're always the one stuck at home taking care of the farm.
Yeah. So what I would say is, okay, so let's negotiate that we'll take our holidays at different time. But if holidays are good for you, then they're good for me. And it's a part of my conditions for working on the farm.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll take 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you, mom and dad, you take 6 because you've worked longer and you own the farm. And but let's talk about that. Let's formalize that and let's document that.
Yeah, that's a great answer to that. Another question here. What are the first 3 steps you recommend for transitioning from off farm to on farm? Starting at basically 0, I grew up around farms, helping on farms, but moved away from it as a young adult and wanting to transition back to be a first generation.
To be a first generation. So wanting to not kind of go off farm and then come back and work for parents, but actually come back and start a farm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah. So I'm, if you want to if you have some familiarity with farming, you kind of know what the business is. So it's like any business. What you may want to do is have a little transition working for another farmer, just to kind of really understand the business piece, wants to grow, pricing, how to buy, where to buy, the basics. And then kind of like once you're refreshed and feeling confident that you're ready to strike out on your own, it's like any business. You want to start small, and then you have a business plan to scale, and you try to work with your lenders to, access capital and buy more land or buy more whatever you want to farm. So, starting young and starting small. Remember that old expression, you can eat a cow one burger at a time? If someone said, hey, Sage, eat that cow. It's so big, it's so overwhelming. But if we just have one burger at a time, just start farming slowly, but really with a plan there's no shortcuts, deferring consumption, driving that truck a little bit longer, right? Not changing the vehicle every 2 years, but taking that money and buying a little more land and a little more land. Really, that's how small farmers get big and successful, by really delaying gratification.
Yeah. Tom, thank you so much for being here today. Your question answering has been so helpful, I know, to all the people on here, because this is a hard topic. This is a hot topic in the farming and ranching community. And it's really a hard topic to bring up with your family, right? What does that look like? And I think you gave some phenomenal answers here today. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to all of us here. And we truly, really appreciate your knowledge and insight into this difficult topic.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Sage, and you're a great interviewer. You interview like an Olympian.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you so much for being here. So, wow, this has been truly amazing. There's been some great information from these fantastic speakers today. And I hope that you all know that those resources will be sent out to you. This is going to be recorded. If you maybe have someone that's struggling with mental health, having a hard time farm transitioning, this might be a great video when it gets sent to you to send to those people so that they can watch this summit. We would absolutely love if you would register for part 2 of the online Young Farmer Summit. That is going to be held on March 31st. And I will be telling more about my Olympic story and ranching story on that event. And we will also be joined by Evan Shout. He is from Maverick Ag, and Evan will be sharing with us how having a CEO mindset can really set you up for success in your business. I know that was answered here. How do you get into this? Evan has the answers. He truly has some amazing insight into farming and ranching. So please, March 31st, that will be our next summit. So please sign up for that. You will receive an email today with all of the resources. You will also receive an evaluation form. If you could please fill out that survey. FCC is already starting to plan next year's event, and we really love your feedback because we change these events based on what farmers and ranchers want to see and hear. So if you could complete that survey, You will also, with completing that survey, be entered into a fantastic prize basket. And that will include Tom's most recent book, The Happy Inheritor, and a selection of really fun treats and beverages produced from producers right here in Canada. So please fill out that survey so you can get registered and get that phenomenal book. That is all we have time here for today. I truly look forward to seeing you guys on March 31st. Thank you for being with us, and happy St. Patrick's Day.